All right, folks, let's get real. Safety isn't just about the rules, it's about leadership, it's about culture. And when you get it right, it's a difference between a workplace that survives and one that barely thrives. Hey, it's Jim Mayer, and the Lead the Change Tour is officially underway. This is a national workshop series built for manufacturers who are ready to stop talking about change and start leading it. We're bringing two powerful workshops across the country. The first is Leading the Change in Digital Transformation, a one-day session designed for plant leaders, HR professionals, and operational decision makers. It's not about which software you choose, it's how you lead your people through that change. We'll dig into the cultural friction that slows transformation down and give you practical tools to build buy-in and momentum from the inside out. The second is Becoming Management Material, a 3-day immersive experience for frontline leaders and supervisors who need more than a checklist. We focus on self-awareness, communication, trust, and mindset because promoting someone into leadership without support is a recipe for turnover, not transformation. Our first 5 stops are Cleveland, Ohio on April 23rd, Charlotte, North Carolina, thank you, Akuma, April 29th to May 1st, Hartford, Connecticut on May 6th, Salt Lake City, Utah on May 8th, and St. Louis, Missouri, thank you, GBG and Conflux on May 28th. We still need local partners in the other cities to host, sponsor, or just plain get involved. If you want visibility with manufacturing decision makers or to send someone from your team, this is a can't miss opportunity. Check out the full tour and claim your seat or your sponsorship at themfgconnector.com. Let's lead the change together. Hello and welcome back to the Manufacturing Culture Podcast. I'm Jim Mayer, and this is a show where we don't talk about products, we talk about the people behind them. The leaders, the problem solvers, the ones who make manufacturing what it is today and what it could be tomorrow. Before we jump in, make sure to check us out at themfgconnector.com. That's where you'll find all of our past episodes, blog posts, and other resources. You can also follow us on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram, sometimes even TikTok, depending on how excited I am about things, to stay in the loop. And if you're looking for solutions, real tactical strategies to fix what's broken in manufacturing, go check out the Manufacturing Connector over on YouTube. Today's guest actually had an episode, so go check out that one after you watch this one. If you like answers to the problems that you're facing in manufacturing, that's a show for you. Now, today's guest, this is going to be a good one, folks. Clare Epstein is someone who gets leadership and safety in a way some people just don't. She spent over 20 years proving that workplace safety isn't about compliance. It's about building it as a culture. As the general manager of commercial at Vector Solutions, she's helping industries like manufacturing, oil and gas, engineering, and construction make safety a way of doing business, not just a box to check. But folks, here's the thing. She didn't follow some straight corporate ladder to get where she is today. She started in urban planning, got her master's from MIT, and somehow found herself leading one of the top EH&S software platforms at IndustrySafe before it was acquired by Vector. She's also had leadership roles at Civis Analytics, the employee app, bringing together tech, data, and strategy to make workplaces better, smarter, and safer. So today, we're going to dig into her story, how she got where she is today, what she's learned about leading through change, and what the future of manufacturing safety and leadership really look like. Let's dive into it. Hello, Clare Epstein. Welcome to the Manufacturing Culture Podcast. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. I'm super happy to be here, Jim. Really always enjoy our conversations and discussions.
Absolutely. We had a really good recording, really great episode on the Manufacturing Connector, talking about Vector, talking about the solutions, seeing it in action. And so now I'm really excited for people to hear your story. How did you get to where you are and what your pathway, your journey has looked like? Clare, The first question I ask all of my guests, and this is where I want to start with you too, because it's kind of like an icebreaker, makes us, get in tune here. What does company culture mean to you?
I mean, I think it's important to many people. If you've ever interviewed candidates or done interviews yourself, when you look to join an organization, people always talk about the culture, right? And everyone says, "Oh, I want a culture fit. I want something that works for me." It's important, and it is important. And to me, it represents how you work together as a team, how you're going to have disagreements, how you have those disagreements, how you make decisions, how you disseminate information, and how you communicate. And to have a strong culture, you really need transparency and trust, and you really need to do what it is you say you're going to do and live up to your mission, vision, and values, which can be, super hard to do in a leadership role. So I think one of the reasons I'm at Vector is I do believe in our mission. I mean, how can you not? It's to make people safer, smarter, and better. And I do think that we have a culture of transparency and trust, and we do what we say we're going to do. And we don't always expect that we're going to agree, and we focus on outcomes. And when we disagree, we figure out how to move forward. So that's what's important to me. That's what makes it fun.
I
And
love that.
I feel very fortunate to be at a place that has a culture that works for me.
I love that. And I think you targeted, you said something that to me is one of the biggest components of culture, and that's that doing what you say you're going to do, following through and acting like the words that you put on the wall, right? Those values that companies put up there. And sometimes it's just word salad. It's nothing to really anybody, but the companies that get it right put a lot of intentionality behind their values, and they live those values on a day in and day out basis. And it sounds like Vector is that place for you.
Yeah, and I think it's very true with if we take it back to, building a safety culture, you really, I don't think, find any organization that doesn't say that safety is a number one priority. Everyone says it, but the ones that have the strong safety culture are the ones that say they walk the talk, they do what they say they're going to do, and they really do make safety a daily part of their job and the job of their teammates.
Awesome. Clara, I want to hear your story. I know the audience wants to hear your story. How did you get to where you are today? What sparked this interest of, working in this industry?
Yeah, I mean, it is for most people, you wake up at a certain stage in your life and you go, how did I get here? And this is my career. This is what I've done in the past. And so it's for me, I think it's a combination of, life just happening, timing of what is going on in the world, and following my passion. So I've always, and one of the reasons I like working at Vector is I have always wanted to do good in the world, and there's lots of different ways to do that. And to work for a company that makes you safer, smarter, better, it feeds into what I believe personally. And so I've always sort of started when I've thought about my career, and when I started out when I graduated college. I was really looking for something that both served my intellectual interest, what I studied in college, in a way that I felt that I was adding value to the world. And safety is a very key part of that. When we talk about the research that Vector has done, the number one reason why workers go to work is pay, and the number two reason on why they stay and what's important to them is safety. So leaving your shift alive is really the most important thing for all of us every day. And I think sometimes we lose perspective on that. Especially if you're not on the front lines and you're me and you're looking at data or you're talking to customers, you kind of lose the fact that the most important thing is that, like, you come home safe at the end of the day to your loved ones. So that's sort of what keeps me doing what I'm doing, and what caused me a bit to get into it. But then, just sort of tactically on how it happened, is I graduated college. I had this degree in urban studies. I was interested in public transportation, of all things, and I got a job with one individual, and I worked for him. It was a very small startup, and we were doing consulting to public transportation agencies in the area of safety. And then I went off to graduate school and I got a master's in city planning. I worked for New York City Transit for a brief period of time. And then I went back to this guy, and we were still doing our public transit safety consulting. And then all of a sudden it was the dot-com era and everyone was building software. And we said, we can build software too. And then we had what I sometimes refer to the dark years as my career, in which I realized I knew nothing about building software. And it's actually quite hard and different than doing consulting. And kept sort of plugging away at creating environmental health and safety software that would help keep our customers safe. And we originally started in public transit because that's where we had done our consulting. But then when we looked at the market trends and really where the risk and danger was, manufacturing is a huge part of that. Manufacturing jobs in general are dangerous. You're working with heavy machinery. It's easy to get injured. You have to have a lot of skill. It can be repetitive. So that means even more, need to focus and train and pay attention. And so we started developing and creating and selling the software to manufacturing companies who tend to have, incident and injury rates higher than average. And that's really where the original software, which is now Vector EHS, came about, and spent many years talking to customers in manufacturing and in other sectors on what's important to them, what data do they collect, how do they use the data, how does that data make you safer, smarter, better. And eventually we were acquired by Vector Solutions. And then I spent a couple years at Vector Solutions trying to integrate the software with the rest of the Vector Solutions. Vector, for folks who don't know it, is started out as an e-learning and training company and has, is one of the leaders in safety training courses. And then I did a couple other things. And then I came back to Vector 2 years ago, really focusing on, again, tying safety and training and data together. Squares focuses squarely on a lot of our manufacturing customers because they're a very important market segment with us and they deal with these issues all the time. So just in terms of my journey, I just kept plugging away at the issues I was interested in. And then eventually something changed. Like eventually there was an opportunity, or there were multiple opportunities. And then I just sort of took what was right for me with balancing my personal life and work-life balance.
I love that. What led you to, I want to back up a little bit even further. What led you to urban planning? Like that, my first degree, when I went back to college in my 30s, I started, because I had built houses up until that point, I started in housing and urban development, right?
Okay.
That's not necessarily a degree pathway that a lot of people take. What led you down that pathway?
So there's a couple of things. One is that I think I was always a little quirky and wanted to chart my own path. Two, my father was a doctor, and I was convinced that I didn't want to do what he did. So I was like, I'm not gonna become a doctor. And when I went to the University of Pennsylvania as an undergrad. And when I was there, Philadelphia is a very tough city. It's very gritty. We're famous for booing Santa Claus, climbing the poles after a Super Bowl win. Go Eagles.
Yes.
So the city was always, like a tough place and had kind of seen better days. And to circle back to manufacturing, its heyday was when it was the center of manufacturing.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And by the time I went to college, that heyday had sort of, disappeared, and there's still manufacturing that goes on there, but there was also a lot of abandoned buildings and just the city wasn't thriving. And I think that sort of asks the question, like, here I am. I'm in, the fifth largest city in the United States. It has this great manufacturing history. It's diverse. It has, it's the Constitution, Independence Hall, all that. And yet it's not thriving today. And why is that? And I think that's what caused me to become an urban studies major.
I love that. So you shared with us a couple of different pit stops along the way, and I don't want to dive into each one. I'm sure at some point we can, and maybe we have a longer episode about that, Claire. But I want to know, and I think my listeners would want to know, that's why I ask these questions, because I think I'm asking what they want to hear. How has your leadership, your approach to leadership changed as you've gone into these different roles in different industries throughout the course of your career? Because I don't know, have you adjusted based on industry, based on what you're doing, etc.?
Yeah, I mean, I've adjusted based on growing older and wiser. And I think hopefully that happens to all of that. And I like to think I lead with a lot more empathy now than I did before. I'm a bit more humble. Sometimes I look back at the younger me and I'm horrified at how much I thought I knew about everything. And as you grow older and you work with different people in different industries, you realize that people have so many different journeys and so many different paths to get to where they are today, and that makes them unique, and it gives them a point of view and a personal style. And so understanding sort of those differences and why people do what they do, I think, and hopefully having that empathy to make them want to make you all want to be on the same team is what I think I do a lot better now than I did when I was younger. I wish I did it even better. I think there is a struggle in manufacturing in almost every sector to just kind of keep do all the things. We've got to produce the widgets. We've got to be safe. We've got to comply. And we don't often spend enough time on why people are there, why they're doing what they're doing, and having the empathy behind it.
Yeah. Here's a chance for you to be a little bit vulnerable. Was there a moment that you can think back on, like a specific moment? I've got a couple in my leadership journey that I'm like, if I were posed with that problem, that instance now, I would have handled that a lot differently. Do you have any of those moments from your past?
Yeah, I think I have multiple, I think as a leader, I try to give clear direction and hold people accountable, which I think is appropriate and it's part of the role of leadership. But I think of multiple moments where I'm trying to hold people accountable because they didn't do what I thought they should do. And sometimes there was like a reason behind it. Maybe they had a personal reason, they had a loss of someone in the family, they were going through a tough time, or they came from, a different place where like meeting your deadline wasn't as essential as perhaps I thought it was. So I can think of I don't think it was like necessarily one dramatic event, but just multiple sort of mini events that didn't go as well as they could have, in terms of like, this is not who I want to be and how I want to express myself.
Got it. Makes total sense. When you got to Vector or got back to Vector, I guess, what does your day to day look like now? And how do you balance strategy and growth and the different things that you've got to prioritize as a leader of this team?
It is a challenge for sure. I try to look at, I see myself, as I'm a general manager, and I sort of see my role as helping the company solve problems that other people aren't working on. Maybe they are working on it and we need a team. But I try to look at what can I do on a day-to-day basis that brings the most value to Vector. So I tackle different issues and problems that arise. But the other thing I realized to be able to do that is I also need to do the things that make me feel rewarded, right? I can't just be, yes, my number one responsibility is in my role is to help grow Vector. But if I am not refreshed and rewarded in some of what I do, then it makes it a lot tougher. And so that goes back to, if we want to go back to manufacturing and our customers, one of the things I find super rewarding is going to visit and talk to customers and hear on the shop floor or touring the shop floor and listening to them about the issues that they face and that they think are important, because it makes me think, one, I'm adding value to Vector, but two, it's super rewarding to hear from customers about their challenges, and then to hear like, hey, your company or your product or your solution helped us solve that problem. So I try to balance, hey, here are the tough things I need to do to grow the company with the things that also make me feel fulfilled.
I love that. And along this culture pathway, you've spent since the .com days, your career making sure, at least then, maybe before then, making sure that organizations understand that safety is a culture and not just that checklist, that rules and regulations, that handbook, right? What do you think are some of the biggest misunderstandings or missteps that leaders make when it comes to building a real safety culture?
I think that the problem, and I don't think it's intentional, right? It goes back to what I said before, where everyone recognizes that safety is a number one priority. I think it goes back to the fact that if you are a leader, you often have competing priorities, right? Safety is a priority, but making sure the business is running smoothly, making sure that the widgets get out on time, that the factory still operates, that you have enough people to do that. Those are real problems too. And so it becomes, God, back to the question was like, I kind of lost my train of thought there. So good thing
That's
this is
okay.
live. So go back a little bit to the question.
Yeah. So, what do leaders misunderstand about building a
Okay.
culture of safety?
So that's it. So I think what they misunderstand is that they let the other priorities crowd out the importance of safety. And I think that they don't understand or misunderstand is that if they have a strong safety culture, then a lot of the other problems that they may be dealing with will take care of themselves. So an example for that is turnover. So if I'm a leader and I'm constantly struggling with turnover, I feel like I don't have enough time to create a safety culture, or I don't have the effort to do that because I'm constantly, hiring and training and dealing with issues like that. But the reality is, if you had a strong safety culture, you would have less turnover. So, spending the time to train people correctly, to make them feel valued, to make them feel that their safety and health is important to them and to the company is actually going to help you with turnover, with production, with reducing downtime, all those things that are important. So, I think keeping that big picture in mind and doing things right from the beginning in terms of safety will actually pay dividends. And it's just, they have to kind of, as a leader, you have to kind of get out of that, oh my God, I'm solving this fire, I'm solving this fire without building the foundation of the safety culture.
Yeah, I love that. How do you think that technology, I mean, you've been around since that .com days. How do you think technology has impacted the way leaders are able to build that culture of safety?
Yeah, it's interesting because it's a little bit of a double-edged sword. I mean, the technology, there's like so many layers, right? On the safety side, there's technology in the machines and the equipment and the automation that makes the job safer. And that I think is great, right? And you see that you talk about digital transformation, you see that with automated, with robotics. Like, I mean, you go to not any, but you go to a majority of manufacturing floors today, and you see the technology that they are using to do their jobs, and it's incredible, right? And the role of the worker. I mean, generally, it is safer because of technology. So that's sort of one version that I think is good. I think the flip side is, and then on the direct safety data side, technology is enabling you to keep track of all of the data. And so you can look and see where your problems are. You can do all your compliance reporting. You can deliver your safety training, and you can see what questions people get wrong, when they're paying attention, and what courses. And that is great, but you can't ignore the human side, right? And so I think
Absolutely.
sometimes with the technology, there is this, I'm just going to sit at my desk and look at numbers versus I need to go out and I need to talk to people. And it's the same thing with mobile devices. If we have children or the younger generation, the mobile device is great, but you have to be able to talk to people and have that conversation.
Yeah.
And that's in manufacturing, that's in your personal life. And so the technology can be that double-edged sword because the numbers and the screens, the people's why we're here. So
Yeah. Our 14-year-old struggles to be able to order her own food when we go to a restaurant. If it was done through Snapchat, she'd be able to order easy as pie, but that human interaction is definitely starting to lack, and I think we're seeing that even in some of the Gen Zs that are coming into the workforce and things of that nature. We'll touch on that in a little bit. I think I want to go back to that comment you made about lessening turnover with all these companies that you've worked with. Can you share one story? It can be anonymous. You don't have to mention the company name, but can you share a story of a company that successfully made this as a culture in front of you? You saw that transformation happen through your work with them, and what that impact was.
I don't know. Let me go back a little bit. I will say so. Vector put on last fall an industrial manufacturing summit for some of our customers in manufacturing, and I asked them because going back to that people element, you read, you see social media, everyone says, okay, the skills gap is real, turnover is real. I said, okay, I have a group of industrial manufacturing safety professionals, learning and D professionals working for some of the largest and best manufacturing companies in the country. And I said, raise your hand, is the skills gap real? Is retention real? And every single one of them said this is the number one problem that they are faced with, and it's real. So I think just validating that it was real was really helpful to me. And then they are all trying to do things to improve retention and to improve safety. It's part of why they're a customer of their customers of Vector Solutions. So they all look at how to pre-screen better. Are we getting the right candidates who have the right skills? And then if they don't have the right skills, are we training them on the skills we know they need to be successful? And I think one of the companies, I'm not going to say their names, but they make engines. They're like, we found out that if someone didn't have math at a certain level, couldn't do a certain level of math, they just were not going to be successful in this, maybe it's an apprentice technician program. So they screen people sort of as soon as they get in to make sure they sort of have those skills. And so I think long term, a lot of the customers there were saying, it is about safety and that's important, but it's about getting people, it's all of us, right? Making sure that when these folks show up to get screened for skills, that they've had the high school education, and the math and everything else they need to be successful in a manufacturing environment. And I think that was a topic that a lot of folks were interested in, is this, emphasis, and you see it in the political discourse on both sides, is a 4-year college education at the price we are paying for it really necessary, and can we get folks into manufacturing careers and again make them safe by doing things a little bit differently.
Yeah, and again, I think we could have a second or a third episode just talking about workforce development and how, in my mind, I think that, yes, we have a skills gap, but I think the culture gap between what the different generations that are in the world of work right now are looking for as far as their career is concerned. But looking at the younger generations, I think that we are trying to apply an apprenticeship model that we have in the US that was developed decades ago, and expecting this generation of young people to want to participate. And I think that's a massive mistake. They do interact on screens. So we have to meet them where they are. They do want more immediate gratification. And I talk at community colleges. And one of the things that I hear so often when I'm talking to young people about why they chose different career paths outside of manufacturing is the length of time that it takes to become an apprentice in the manufacturing industry. Whereas other industries, you can become an apprentice and be making your journey person's wage in a much shorter period of time.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think the customers at that industrial manufacturing summit, they realize that they all are trying to do the right things. They all have relatively strong safety cultures, or again, I think, wouldn't be Vector customers because they recognize they got to put effort and focus into those things. But they're struggling with it for sure.
Talking about outdatedness, what are some myths or outdated mindsets in manufacturing when it comes to safety?
Let me think. I still think that there is a focus on compliance. Not everyone, not the leaders. But I do think there is a subsegment of manufacturers out there that think, okay, I'm going to follow the OSHA requirements. I'm going to check the box. And that it's going to be enough, and it's going to be enough to keep my workers safe, and it's going to be enough for retention. And I think the leaders know that that's not the case, that it has to be a multi-pronged approach. It has to get back to the safety culture, and that you can't just, check the box with some of these either whether it's Vector's online training courses or anyone else's, that you really have to do more.
Yeah. Let's go back to talking about Claire. What's been the most rewarding moment in your career so far? And you're in media res. You've got a long career ahead of you. This isn't the end. This isn't the beginning.
Right.
This is right in the middle. What's been the most rewarding moment so far?
So there's been a couple. One is when we did sell the company that I spent many, many years building to Vector Solutions. It was, oh my God, someone does value this. This is a tool that folks use. That was a highlight. I think, the other highlights are when you meet a customer and they say, yeah, this software that you created or you and your team created, I use this course and it makes my life better and it makes my people's life better. That is really the most rewarding.
Claire, how do you stay ahead of leadership trends? I mean, I've been in leadership roles for 15-ish, 20-ish years. The trends that have come and gone over that 15 to 20 years
it's
are wild. I mean, I've got leadership books back here and I tell people all the time, there's not really new research done into leadership. It's just people packaging the same concepts, the original concepts in a different way to match the needs of the industry. How do you adjust, or how do you grow as a leader, I guess, with all these trends and fads out there?
Yeah. And I only pay a sort of half an eye to them because I do think you could kind of take you down a rabbit hole, and you have to be true to yourself. You have to be authentic. I mean, that is one of the leadership principles. If you've ever talked or done, because you train people as well, if you talk about like public speaking, and if you're not funny, don't try to be funny when you speak. You have to be who you are, and you have to
Yes.
be authenticity. So I do that, and I think that helps. I do try to have empathy, which I think is also like an evergreen leadership role. And I do try to, follow what we talked about, circle back to what we talked about at the beginning, that trust and transparency, and do what you say you're going to do. That goes a long, long way. And you can kind of, I don't want to say ignore some of the fads, but like that, those pieces are really important.
I love it. I love it.
So that's how I deal with it.
Claire, as we look to the future of manufacturing, right? We've talked about digital transformation a little bit. We've talked about, what has happened in the manufacturing industry. What does a future of manufacturing look like through that safety lens? What does training look like for safety in 5 to 10 years?
Yeah, so I think there's a bunch of different trends, and we may have spoken about this on the other podcast I did, but you do have younger generations come in, and the stereotype is they don't want to sit through long, boring courses. Though I will say the older generation didn't like sitting through long, boring courses either. They just did it. So there's definitely an emphasis on having more digestible courses, to having that micro learning, to making the courses more engaging and more gamified. And that's something Vector Solutions is working on. We're doing a lot of like interactive gaming courses designed specifically for manufacturing. So at some point I'll have to share. I don't know if we had
Awesome.
them the last time we talked. I'll have
I
to
don't
share
think we
some of those
did.
too.
We may have to do a second episode of The Connector if you've got new stuff to share,
Yeah.
Claire. All right.
So I do think those are trends. And I think also mobile is a trend, right? That if you look back 5 or 10 years ago, 5, 10 years ago, most people had a mobile device, but a lot of manufacturing companies were very, very reluctant to let mobile on the shop floor, to let people use their mobile devices. And that is a trend that is changing.
Okay.
When we had that same industrial manufacturing summit, and I said, well, what is your mobile device policy? There were 10 customers in the room. We probably got 15 different answers on how they're grappling with it. But the trend is, yes, we are actually going to allow employees to have their mobile devices more readily available. And we're going to do more and more sort of SOPs and safety training via mobile devices. And it takes different forms. So sometimes it's a shop worker or someone in manufacturing using their own device. Sometimes there's an iPad on the shop floor that everyone uses. Sometimes each individual employee has their own iPad that they use. Some companies are much stricter at like in terms of what information you can download from the iPad and what is available. But this idea in the manufacturing environment that the shop floor doesn't have internet access and they need things offline, like that's going away. They are all going, one of the issues that we hear is they say, our workforce is going to YouTube to look up how to do this, use this piece of machine, how to fix something. And they're like, we want that same experience for our employees because it's quick, it's efficient, it's what they're used to, but we want it verified, right? We don't want to try, like, we don't know what they're downloading from YouTube, but if you Vector had something like that where it's very much in the flow of work, the training being in the flow of work is really something that is a continuing trend we're going to see. And that often means getting that information from a mobile device or some other device that's pulling up the video or the information you need it when you need it.
I love it. I love it. I love to hear from all of my guests, but specifically the people who have the solutions in this industry, what the future looks like to them, because it's a pretty neat peek behind the curtain as what's coming down the pipe. Claire, my last question I ask every guest is, what haven't I asked you that you want to share with the audience?
I would say for me, I think, and I don't know that you've asked it, or haven't asked, but I will share anyway, is like, I tend to be a little harsh on myself. So if I look back at in terms of my career and what I've done, is I would say I wish I offered myself more grace, but I also wish I offered other people more grace. So I think that is a good note to kind of like end on in terms of a question.
I love that. And that will definitely be one of the highlights that I put out there on social media. I don't think any of us gives ourselves enough grace on a day-to-day basis. So I love that reminder, because we all need that reminder sometimes. So
We do. We're all human.
yes, and sometimes that's more painful than others. Claire,
Yes.
as always, this has been a lot of fun. Thank you so much for joining us today. Appreciated hearing all about your journey, the different stops along the way, your view of culture, your vulnerability behind some of the leadership mistakes that you made, and the way that you learned from them. So thank you very much for being here.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's always fun.
Absolutely. Folks, thank you for listening or watching if you're on YouTube, but thanks for being here. Here's what I need from you to wrap this up. If you like this conversation, if it got you thinking, I need you to share it with people. I need you to send it to a friend or a colleague, your boss, your grandma, whoever needs or should hear this. And if you haven't already, follow the show on whatever platform you're on, leave a review and rate the show. Every time you do those three things, it helps more people find the show. And I'd love to hear what resonated with you. You can even just put Claire loves safety in the comments, and that would help. But I'd also love to hear what resonated with you from today's episode. And if you want more, again, head over to themfgconnector.com to find past episodes, blog posts, resources, our new tour. And don't forget to follow us on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. And keep the conversation going. Talk to us about what you're seeing in your safety culture out in your shop. Again, if you're into solutions and you want to see how companies like Vector are actually fixing the biggest challenges in manufacturing, go check out the Manufacturing Connector over on YouTube. This is where I really get into nuts and bolts of what's working in the industry today as far as software and services are concerned. So, folks, that's a wrap for this episode. Keep leading, keep learning, and keep building the future of manufacturing. See you next time.